Last week I gave you the wrong spelling, and I know when I said it of that word lamachin, it's actually laminin. And I know when it came out, it didn't feel right, but I said, we'll just deal with it next week. So if some of you were looking up lamachin this week and couldn't find something, you're welcome for having to use a little technology there to try to figure some stuff out. But we are going to be looking at a compound today called laminin, which we'll spend a little bit of time with that here in just a second. It's pretty interesting what it can do. Has anybody ever heard of laminin before? Yes, a couple of you had. Good. I've got a little video that I hope works that I'm going to try to show you today too. We'll see how good I am with technology, if it works or not. But we've been going through these creation days now. It's been several weeks we've been going through this. We finished up last week by looking at the days of filling, and we stopped after we talked about some of the creatures and the dinosaurs and the stuff, the animals that God made on the earth on day 6. And we stopped there specifically because I wanted to spend some time today talking about the creation of man. And we finished up last week kind of talking about the fact that there were dinosaurs on the earth when man was alive, and they would have been there all the way up through the flood, and people would have seen them and coexisted with them. And we saw some of the instances in Scripture in which God actually talked about some of those things and kind of foreshadowing and using His foresight to put some proof there in Scriptures about how skeptical we are today on the existence or the fact that they were alive, which is pretty cool that He did that, of course. And the explosion of creatures and species that were now on the earth because of days 4, 5, and 6 was probably obviously many more species and animals and stuff on the earth then than there are now. I know just in the time that they have been sort of keeping up with stuff in the last 150 years, we've seen a decrease of some of the species and decrease of some of the animals and stuff that are there, which is of course that's because of death and because of sin that was here on the earth. But I've got a couple of pictures that I don't think I showed you last week of some of the animals that would have been created. Of course, that's a Bengal tiger who's endangered right now, but pretty cool. One of my favorite animals. I think they're cool looking. I think those are dachshunds, miniature dachshunds, I think. Are those puppies, which are pretty cute. There's a spider, a tarantula, African tarantula actually. If you notice, it may be hard for you all to see. Let me kill this slide for you. This is a really cool little. Gets me every time, Pastor Rob. I don't know what left and right is. But you can see it's got all kinds of different colors. It's green on its upper torso and yellow on its bottom torso. Its legs are actually blue, and it spins a pretty awesome web too. The African tarantula does. They're huge webs, right? They're really, really big webs, and they catch a lot of stuff in those because they live in the desert, so there's not a whole lot of stuff for them to catch, so they have to make big webs to be able to catch what they can. But it's just cool, really neat that they can do that. Of course, the spiders are a lot creepy and stuff. A lot of people don't like spiders, but spiders are pretty amazing animals and what they're able to do, and it's just one of the things there that kind of go with it. Now, I hope that works in a second. But now let's get to later on in the 6th day, God's crowning achievement here. Everything that He has created up to this point, has essentially led to the end or the middle of day 6, I guess, or the last thing that He created on day 6. This was the crowning inhabitant on the earth of this world, and when He made man. And He made man in a very specific way. And if we get to Genesis chapter 1 and go to verses 26 and 27, and we see here the creation of man. And so after we see verse 25, all the cattle and things that creepeth on the earth after His kind, God saw that it was good. So He creates all the animals. And then He comes and says, and God said, let us make man in our own image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth. In verse 27, so God created man in His own image. In the image of God created He him, male and female created He them. And God blessed them. And God said unto them, Be fruitful and multiply, and replenish the earth, and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the fowl of the air, and over every living thing that moveth upon the earth. So we see now God finally getting to the end here of day 6, when he creates man. And we saw that he created man, of course, in his own image and in his likeness. And God relates to man here the being of having being moral, and designed them to essentially live forever. Right? If God created this man after his own image and in his likeness, he created him with the same similar morality, and designed them to live forever. If you will, go with me to Genesis chapter 5. And look at the first 3 verses of Genesis chapter 5. And it says, And this is the book of the generations of Adam. In the day that God created man, in the likeness of God made he him, male and female created he them, and blessed them, and called their name Adam, and in the day where they were created. And Adam lived 130 years, and begat a son in his own likeness after his image, and called him Seth. If you'll go also over to James chapter 3. And look at verse number 9. And verse 9 of James 3 says, Therewith bless we God, even the Father, and therewith curse we men, which are made after the similitude of God. While we're in the New Testament, let's go to Ephesians chapter 4. And look at verse 24. Ephesians 4:24 says, And that ye put on the new man, which after God is created in righteousness and in true holiness. Go to Colossians chapter 3. And look at verse 10. And have put on the new man, which is renewed in knowledge after the image of him that created him. Right? So we got a whole bunch of instances there in which God specifically speaks of creating man in his own image. Okay? We are an extension of who God is. Okay? In as far as creation goes. And he created us in that way. In the distinction from animals, humans have a lot of things in which we are different, in a lot of ways in which makes us different from the animals. Our personalities are different, the intellect that we have, the emotion, our will, the ability we have to reason through things. There's a whole bunch of different facts that we can go through that show us how we are much different from the animals, because God created us in that way. And he created us in a way that we have dominion and power over the animals, okay? All of these characteristics that we have, these human characteristics, emotion, intellect, will, ability to do the things that we are able to do, are all characteristics who derive directly from the source. And that source, of course, is God. God, who possesses the infinite perfection, and understanding this leads us to consider the inestimable, but we can't put a value on human life. Okay? And every human life. If you go back to Genesis with me and go to chapter 9, look at verse 6. Whoso sheddeth man's blood, by man shall be his blood shed, for in the image of God made he man. So, understanding the source of what our humanity comes from, and understanding the characteristics that we have because of it, leads us to consider that there is an inestimable value on every single human life. Okay, every human life is made in God's image. Okay, and we can't really place a value on that. Now, in today's society, of course, we know that you can be thrown in jail for quite some time for killing an animal, right? But there's millions of babies that die every day, and it seemed to be commonplace and okay. So you see the huge flip there in the value of human life. We as a society value the creatures and stuff that we are supposed to have dominion and power over more than we value the lives of our own, okay? And just as a quick side note, I don't know if I think it's out yet, but the movie that is coming out about abortion and about Planned Parenthood, and I wanted just to mention this because the lady that was in charge of Planned Parenthood, does anybody know what I'm talking about, the movie that's coming out? Unplanned maybe is the movie's name. Top of my head, I don't really remember. Is that right, Haley? Is Unplanned, that's the movie's name? There's the lady that was in charge of Planned Parenthood. Politics aside, Planned Parenthood is an evil organization, okay? And we shouldn't be funding it. That's a side note. But the lady that was in charge of that, she became in charge of Planned Parenthood, was the youngest person to do it, and she was helping people, obviously allowing women to perform abortions. They had a new method in which they wanted to come in and do it. She found these two doctors that were doing this new, less invasive method, and they needed help. And so she went in to help them. And she took the ultrasound wand and was holding on the mother's stomach and watched the abortion take place. And that changed her mind. Excuse me. On abortion. And of course, she came out against it, and she wrote these books and all kinds of stuff that happened. And they're doing a movie about her life story because she is one of the major people who are against Planned Parenthood. Because she realized quickly that human life is much more important than... Just a second, sorry. Then the value, then what society puts it on, sorry. Having that ultrasound. Okay. Becoming a father has changed my... You understand. Anywho, so the creation of man in God's image, in the importance of that. And if you get down to the actual science of how the body works, which is what I want to spend a little bit of time doing today, the fact that we are moral beings, the fact that we are able to do the things that we are the direct relation and because of the characteristics in which God gave us. So in the creation of man on the sixth day, both male and female, which of course we get over in Genesis chapter 2 and talk a little bit more about the expansion of the creation of female. But man and woman both as moral beings are commanded here in the scriptures not only to reproduce and pervade the earth, but to take dominion over the creation of the earth as well. And it shows the complete distinction between man and all of the other life forms that are on earth, okay? Underneath man, the animals exercise a limited form of this dominion over the things. We know that there are a setup of the food chain essentially in how animals operate, and there's a hierarchy to that, but we as humans are over that, and God has given us a power and dominion over that as well. Okay, in 10 different times here in this chapter alone, God limits the procreation, the reproduction of plants and animals, and by implications, man, he limits that reproduction to their own kind. Okay, and with that exact definition of kind being there and And showing that, again, shows how God took a little extra special care. That's the point I'm trying to get to. Took a little extra special care in when he created man and woman, and then put everything else kind of under the dominion of them as well. All right, now creation at the end of day 6 here was entirely perfect. There was no sin, there was no death. We had Adam and Eve here, and all the animals and everything was exactly as God had wanted it to be. Okay, and when He formed man and formed us in a certain way, He used a variety of things, I guess, when He was forming us, or in the process of forming us, allowed us to have a variety of things that are pretty special and are things that aren't seen anywhere else in all of creation. One of those things is something called laminin, and that's kind of where I wanted to get to. And laminin is a protein. Now, your body is made up of lots and lots of proteins. There are 28 different codes for proteins that are in your cells that are happening all the time. Okay, that's what allows you to have the energy that you have, allows you to walk around and do all of the stuff that you're able to do. Within that, what they call extracellular matrix, which is a fancy word, it means base layer. Right? So in the base layer of those proteins is something called laminin. And laminin, as you'll see here, hopefully in just a second, is essentially what kind of holds your body together. Okay, so that extracellular base layer, that the bottom, the foundation of this, is held together by something. Just like when you're building something, you put the foundation down, you got to attach stuff to the foundation. That's how you're able to build stuff, right? Laminin is the protein essentially that allows us to do that. Land and click that. Let's see if this will work. If you have to exit out of the slideshow to do it, it's fine too. It may not work over live stream, but we'll try. But I'll let you do it, bud. Can you exit out of the... Yeah, bring that up. Just go to Firefox and bring it up that way. See if it'll work that way. Can you see the fire when it's... There it is. Excellent.
Did you know that you are fearfully and wonderfully made? God is the one who created you. Breathed His breath of life into you. He has poured out in you skills, talents, and abilities unique to you and you alone. There is no one like you that has ever existed in the past, the present, and in the future. Want to know some amazing facts about you? At the moment of your conception, you have a replicating cell, also known as a stem cell, which is respirating and has its own DNA identity. Your heart began to beat just 3 weeks after your conception. Still don't think that's amazing? Well, listen to this. Our eyes can distinguish up to 1 million color surfaces and take in more information than the largest telescope ever created. Our hearing is so sensitive, it can distinguish between hundreds of thousands of different sounds. In one day, your heart beats 100,000 times, 35 million times a year, and during a typical human lifespan, the human heart will beat approximately 2.5 billion times, and your heart is made up of 80% water. Still not convinced? Well, there's one more thing you should know about. Ever heard of laminin? Laminin is a protein found in the extracellular matrix. The sheets of protein that hold all internal organs, also called the basement membrane. Laminin is vital to making sure your overall body structures hold together. Laminin tells other cells what to do and is described as the rebar of the human body. Without laminin, your body would literally fall apart. Here is a scientific diagram of the cell adhesion molecule laminin, holding your body together right now. Laminin, the molecule that is holding you together right now, is in the perfect shape of the cross that Jesus gave up his life on for you. Here is an electron microscopic image of an actual laminin molecule. You are being held together right now as you sit and watch this by Jesus Christ. He put his stamp of approval on you. Psalms chapter 139, verses 13 through 14 says, "For you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well. You are a treasure to God. You are held together by Jesus Christ. You are fearfully and wonderfully made."
Which, that's pretty cool, right? That's an interesting thing, of course, and we know that God created. I mean, we know how God works. We know the way His brain kind of works about things, and we're sure that was designed that way purposely, right? So that when we got to the point where we could actually discover that and see that, we would kind of get to where we would get to this molecule and be able to see it was in the shape of a cross, which is really, really interesting, really, really cool. And the fact that it's essentially what holds us together is really, really neat as well. So that's what that is, and that's the way, of course, we know that we've seen the scripture says there in Psalms 150, whatever, 154, I think it is, we are fearfully and wonderfully made, and God created us in His perfect fashion, and created us in the image of Him. Now, back to the point before I lost my composure there, that movie coming out is about the lady that was against, well, she was for Planned Parenthood, and now she's speaking out against it. She's written books, she's doing all kinds of interviews and stuff. Ultrasound came in and she actually saw the baby trying to get away from the needle that was coming in, essentially to take the baby's life, right? So this is God creating this miracle of life, right? And then the fact that the abortions that we see every day, and we know that we hear about kind of the stuff that's going on, the value of human life is much less than it was when God initially created it, in the value that He wants us to put on it, okay? It shows, again, just the decline of the morals of our society and kind of where we're at as a society. And then, of course, we know the problems that we have as well. And we can go back and see that some of the stuff that God put high value on that we don't put the value on, and we kind of see the problem with it as well. And when I saw our little one, the last couple of weeks ago on the ultrasound, even at 8 weeks, they gave us a 4D ultrasound picture for whatever reason, and you could see a little nose and see some stuff even at 8 weeks, and it just blew my mind that people would go in and would be for that and not consider that, even at 8 weeks, not consider that life and not consider it there. It's just it's sickening, and it's absolutely mind-blowing that people are for that. And of course, a couple of months ago, we even heard as far as keeping the baby just comfortable while it was been born to decide if they wanted to take the life away. Guys, that's genocide. That's murder. That is not the way in which God had created stuff. So again, politics aside, we as Christians, we've got to make a stand somewhere on some morals and stand somewhere on some of the stuff that's kind of going on in the world today, because God made us in such a way, in such an awesome way, in such in His own image, that there should be some value to it. Okay, and a couple of more things I just kind of wanted to show you. Let's jump out of that. There's another picture of that laminin molecule, which again, it's really neat. God did that on purpose. And Lou Giglio, I think is his name, he has a whole big thing on it. Some of the stuff Lou Giglio says I'm not okay with, but the thing, his big lecture or this speech that he gives on laminin is really, really good. It's really interesting. He goes into some really cool things. It's like 25, 30 minutes on YouTube. You get a chance to watch it this week. It is really good what he kind of says about that. Here are some other things things, and you can't, I had to kind of condense this so you could kind of put it up there. I'll read it to you because I know it's kind of hard to see. These are just some facts of the human body that are amazing. The largest bone in your body is your femur. Okay, that's of course the big bone in your leg. The femur itself can actually support 30 times the weight that you actually are. Ounce for ounce, your femur is stronger than steel. Messages from the human brain travel along nerves at up to 200 miles an hour. And the nervous system, we could spend a whole lot of time talking about that. You put your hand on something and you feel it, right? That impulse has traveled from your finger to your brain and back to your finger in the time that you touch that. That is amazing that your body is able to do that. The next one, an adult human, 25% of your bone mass is actually in your feet. The gluteus maximus, which is what you're sitting on, is the largest muscle in your body. The human ear and nose never stop growing. There's more bacteria right now in your mouth than there are people in the world. A human's little finger, your pinky finger, it contributes to over 50% of the total strength of your hand. It would take someone typing 60 words per minute, 8 hours a day, around 50 years just to type out the human genome, which is the DNA that you have. If a human being's DNA was uncoiled, so the small DNA molecules that are in each of your cells, if they were taken and uncoil it would stretch 10 billion miles. Okay, that's from Earth to Pluto and then back, and that's within one of the microscopic cells that's in your body. Within 3 days of dying, the enzymes that were digesting the food that was in the person that just passed away's stomach begin to break down and digest the body. For an adult human, taking just one step uses 200 muscles. The human skeleton completely renews itself every 10 years. All right, and that's just 10 facts. We could go, well, I could give you these for days and days and days. Another interesting fact, that you are actually taller in the morning than you are in the evening, because the way your bones regenerate and the way gravity kind of pulls down your body, you lay down, gravity is not as strong on your body, and your bones kind of regenerate. Just some kind of more interesting things. God created all these things, right? He put all these things into motion. He made us in His own image. We are fearfully and wonderfully made. Let me tell you something, guys. No scientific evolution theory can convince me that this and all the other stuff just happened by chance and that it evolved from the fish and the monkey and all the stuff that happened. There is an intelligent design to our human bodies. God created us in a very specific way. The processes of our 13 systems that we have, our reproductive system and digestive system and all the stuff, our circulatory system, all that stuff that happens and goes on was formed in a very, very specific way to allow us to live in the way that we do. Okay, and we could spend a whole day talking about just what your eyes are able to do, and the fact that your lungs can transfer oxygen and carbon dioxide and filter out some of the other stuff that's in the air and only put the good stuff into your body, and how blood regulates and how your temperatures regulate and how the skin regulates your body. All the stuff that it does, God created it, and He created it to be perfect, and He created it perfectly in the way in which He wanted to create it. Okay, don't let anybody ever convince you anything different. You are made specifically and especially in the way in which God wanted you to be made. And when He was creating Adam and Eve way back 6,000 years ago, whatever it was, He had each and every one of us in mind as well, which is just really, 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 really cool. So from the days of feeling, we get into chapter 2, and we get to the days of rest, and we're going to do a little bit of this because we have time today. So Genesis chapter 2, of course we know here on the 7th. Let's one more thing I forgot to mention. Back in verse 28 of chapter 1, I had marked this and then ran over it, but let's go back to it because it's important for us to look at. after he created man and woman here and given them dominion over all the stuff that he created in the previous days, he gets to verse 28 and he says, "And God blessed them, and God said unto them to be fruitful, multiply, and do what? Replenish the earth." Now, if you were to just give that to somebody, when you replenish something, means that what? There had to have been something there before, correct? It's just in common terms, right? If I'm going to replenish my gas tank, I'm going to put gas back in my tank, all right? Now, there are people who take this verse and the fact that it says replenish there, that God is telling them to replenish, that it had already been full, the earth had already been, had some stuff in it, and their job was to replenish, okay? That's the argument that people make, that there was a pre-Adam race that was here on earth that was destroyed in some way. This leads into the evolutionary theory on how life got here, and that God then created Adam and Eve after all these millions of years later and blessed them and told them to replenish. Now, any good scholar knows you take the Bible and written over into English. We got to get back into the actual Greek and Hebrew that it was written into, and probably Aramaic here, I guess, for the Old Testament. And you go in and look at it, and the actual word there, replenish, in the original text simply means fill. Okay, the definition for replenish means fill. When used in the very, very original and kind of the way it was written. Okay, so don't let that verse there and the fact that the replenish is there, which has allowed some people to try to say, well, the Bible's wrong here. If we say the Bible wrong here, then we can say the Bible's wrong in a bunch of other places. Just another attack on the scriptures used by evolutionary scientists who try to debunk the truths and facts that are here. The word replenish there simply does mean fill. The verse does not imply that there was some type of pre-Adam race of people that previously inhabited the earth, okay? That verse right there, verse 28 of chapter 1, has been in some serious debates here over the last 5 to 10 years because of the stuff that's there, all right? So again, that just simply means to fill. Not to refill, just to fill, all right? Now, chapter 2, verse 1, we get to the days of rest. Of course, we know on the seventh day, God rested, and he rested both to mark the completion of his creating the world, and also establishes here the pattern that would later be incorporated into the law of Moses as far as the Sabbath day goes. All right, so God did this to say that I'm completed, I'm done with the creation stuff, and I'm setting up essentially a 7-day week, right? That the last day of that 7-day week would be a day of Sabbath, in which, of course, when in the law of Moses, they're over in Exodus chapter 20, which we will get to much later on, kind of setting that up as the Sabbath day. Go with me, please, quickly as we finish to Psalms chapter 33. And as you're turning over there, Genesis 2, 1, 2, and 3, then the heaven and the earth were finished, and all the host of them. And on the seventh day God ended his work which he had made, and he rested on the seventh day from all his work which he had made. And God blessed the seventh day and sanctified it, because that in he had rested from all the work which God had created and made. Over in Psalms chapter 33. Just a second. I thought I had it marked, but I didn't. And look at the first 5 verses of chapter 33. Rejoice in the Lord, O ye righteous, for praise is comely for the upright. Praise the Lord with harp, sing unto him with psaltery, and an instrument of 10 strings. Sing unto him a new song, play skillfully with a loud noise, for the word of the Lord is right, and all his works are done in truth. He loveth righteousness and judgment. The earth is full of goodness of the Lord. Look at verses 6 through 9. By the word of the Lord were the heavens made, and all the hosts of them by the breath of his mouth. He gathered the waters of the sea together as a heap. He layeth up the depth in storehouses. Let all the earth fear the Lord. Let all the inhabitants of the world stand in awe of him. For he spake, and it was done. He commanded, and it stood fast. We could spend time talking about the goodness of creation, and how with the goodness of the Lord that we see in creation. But if we get to verses 6, 7, 8, and 9, what should our response be to the Creator that has created this for us? what should our response be? Verses 6 through 9. Awe, right? We should be in awe. We should be in wonder. We should be in fear. Proper responses to what He's done for us as well. So the day of rest God set up for us, and for the day of rest He set up for Himself, after He created the world that He did and the way that He created it for us, we as Christians and people should be in awe and appreciative of what God has essentially given us to enjoy while we're here. Okay? Next week we'll hopefully get this finished up. We'll look at God deserves our worship because He relates to us. So we'll get into chapter 4. We'll look more in depth at the creation of Eve and the life that He gave Adam and Eve, the way He sustained the earth. And we'll talk a little bit about the Garden of Eden as well next week, and the possible location of it, I think it may be, and kind of some of the stuff that was there as well. Okay? So let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, thank You again for the lesson that we have here and for the fact that You detailed all of this out for us very plainly, very clearly, so that we can see how You took all these things and created them and just spoke them into existence and then put them there for us to enjoy. And this would be as a reminder to us, Lord, of the power and majesty of who You are. So I pray that we all never lose sight of the fact that the one that took special care in creating us in the image of Yourself, Lord, because You want us to have a relationship and You want us to be intimately involved, Lord, with You. And I pray, Lord, that we never lose sight of that fact. We have a desire, and a burning desire, in fact, an insatiable desire to get to know You as in depth as we can. Lord, I pray for Pastor Rob as he comes in the next hour as well, that You just use him and keep the messages he has for us to keep us attentive to it. In Your name I pray. Amen.